morning. Today we're going to be working on a 2003 VW Super Beetle, or whatever they're called. We're going to be changing the front rotors and pads. First obvious thing you got to do is get the tire off. And VW has this 74-point bolt that has to fit into one of the lugs to become its own lug before you can get this thing off. When I first took this off, never having worked on a Beetle before, I was like, how in the world am I going to get this off? And I searched through the trunk and I find this. I don't know what happens when you lose this and you're stranded on the side of the road. So kind of an important piece if you own one of these cars. But basically, it's only on one of them. I don't know what the other side looks like, but I'm assuming it's just some kind of security feature whereby somebody can't steal these high dollar wheels. So it's a 17 millimeter underneath. I've already broken all of them except one. But you obviously want to get them snagged loose before you start jacking it up. This vehicle needs air in the tires once we're done. And once we get it up off the ground high enough, which is right there, our 17 millimeter gets a little easier. You can use the provided tire tool that comes with it. I just find that those things are kind of cheap, so I'd rather use my own breaker bar. And then you just zip them off. Save your little security piece until you're ready to use it. And once you slip it on there, it basically becomes its own 17 mil. Then you can get it off. So as you can see, two completely different and different sized. You're not getting that off with a normal look. So, once the tire's off, we can inspect what we got here. Obviously your caliper assembly, caliper bracket, and these things are old. This car's been sitting for a little while, so we need to clean up the hub and put some anti-seize on it. If you'll notice, there is a set screw here. There are arguments that, yeah, you don't need that set screw. You don't have to put it in there. It's a Phillips screwdriver, so I don't know why you wouldn't. All it's there for, typically speaking, is for when they're on the factory assembly line. It allows the rotor to sit flush against the hub while they're assembling everything around it. So I always put it back on there, because why wouldn't you? And it's not like it's some indomitable task. So basically you've got a couple bolts on the back of the caliper bolt, or the caliper assembly in the bracket. You gotta get those off, and then everything else just comes right apart. I don't know if it's on this side or the other, but there is a, on one of the pads on this particular model, there is a wear indicator wire. So you wanna make sure that you don't mess that up and crimp it when you're reinstalling it. Or inspect the fact that the one that's on there is good, because if it's not, it should have thrown a code and let you know that, hey, there's something wrong with your front brakes. So we'll be right back. Okay, so next thing you want to do is you got these little plastic caps that are on the back of what holds the caliper to the bracket. Okay, they just pop out, stick you a small flathead in there, and it's just a little black cap that goes flying when you throw it out. That's all there is to it. And there's another one at the bottom for the other bolt. And then you've got basically a 7 millimeter hex to break these bolts loose. They shouldn't be that tight. They're only like 18, 20 foot-pounds, so they should come off pretty good. And really, like I said, the only difference with the other side is the fact that you have that sensor, the wear indicator line, that basically, once it gets down to a certain portion of the pad being gone, it breaks a circuit and lets your dash know that, hey man, you don't have any brakes left and all. So there's that. And these things have not been used in a while, but these are basically pins like that. And the bottom one having a lift is like the greatest asset in life, but for most of us, it's not a thing. So we're on the ground. And one of the things you want to do is not let the caliper fall. Because if you notice this here, right here, that's your brake line with all your fluid in it. And if that snaps, you'll be rebuilding the caliper with new lines, which is a lot of fun, especially when you don't plan on doing it. This thing takes forever. These things, like I said, they're pretty old and dated. They haven't been used in a while, and they're grinding like crazy. Anyway, so there's your other one. And then the next step is to get the caliper off. And it's just gonna slide out. And it's probably gonna be stiff because you've got so much wear going on. And one of the things you wanna do is pay attention to the orientation of these pads. They can go in upside down in some models and all that. So you don't want that to happen. And like I said, you wanna string this thing up. Sometimes it's easier said than done. But for this one, I'll hook this little hook here, and then I can stick this in a bolt hole or something to get it out, just to get it out of the way. And you suspend it. And as you see, if you can see, the line is not under tension, okay? Now, the next thing you gotta do is take this bracket off, take that set screw out, and your rotor will pop off and we can put new ones. I always like to put new rotors on. It's not that much more money, and I find turning it is just a pain in the butt. And they're just always so trashed for the most part. Anyway, it's just a good peace of mind for me. I always just switch them out, okay? Uno momento. All right, and what I just learned was these stay on to the whole hub assembly, so that's nice. That's what's beautiful about cars, is they're all different. Get you a large head Phillips, take that set screw out, and what we're probably gonna find is, as expected, this thing's rusted on. So give it some taps and it'll come off. That actually went a lot easier. So as you can see, rust loves to have sex with itself, and those things will bond onto here. So we'll clean this hub up, grind it down just a little bit and clean it off, and then we'll put some anti-seize on there, which if you've ever used anti-seize, you'd know it because you'd still be covered in anti-seize. So be right back. All right, so take our pads out, and they're just old. They just need to be replaced. They've got life left in them as far as the thickness, but this thing has been jacked up for so long, it's not really worth the, like I said, the peace of mind that comes with just putting new lines on, or new pads on. So, as I said, you want to get out your trusty anti-seize and just liberally apply some of it on there so that the hub mating surface isn't as likely to attract rust bonding and whatnot. And it doesn't have to be a ton. I guess technically you could use too much, but for the most part, you're just trying to get it to where everything's covered in silver, and hopefully not you, only the vehicle part. And that's pretty much it for that. All right, so we've got our caliper done. We've still got to compress the caliper because, as you know, that thing was clamped onto the rotor when we took it off. So you're not going to be able to fit two new rotors in there, typically speaking, especially if they were worn down, because they obviously had worn down, so they're thinner, and so that pushes the caliper out further. So you've got to compress it back out. There's a few ways of doing it. You can do it with a regular C-clamp and a piece of wood, a scrap piece of metal. I've got a brake tool that I use that expands them back out. And then you can fit your new stuff in. It's always a good idea to clean as much as you can up with brake clean. Just get everything, all the contaminants and everything off of it. We're gonna open up our rotors here in just a second. You always wanna clean those with brake clean because they come from the factory with like a anti-rust inhibitor type of spray, and you wanna do your best not to touch them with your hands. So always put fresh gloves on when I'm getting ready to touch the rotor as it's going on, because you don't want the oils from your fingers and whatnot on there, because that can obviously adversely affect the working capability of the pad itself against the rotor. So we'll get all this cleaned up and we'll start reassembling this bad boy. All right, so as you can see, this is the tool I use. It just slaps in there, and as you can see, the piston itself covered in all kinds of cobwebs from sitting. You just ratchet it in until it's gone back into its home. and it applies even pressure so that you're good with not messing up the boot, because it's obviously rubber. You mess that up again, you're putting in a new caliper. And sometimes you don't quite know how far you've got going on, but you get it in there to where it feels like it's good enough for the new calipers. And then we set them in there, and then they pop in just so, like that. And then the other one pops in just like so, like that. And then obviously your rotor now has a new home to grasp onto. So we'll carefully get that out of the way so it doesn't fall, and then we'll reassemble the new rotor. All right, so with fresh gloves, so you don't contaminate anything, open your box and just liberally apply brake clean. You want to get the whole surface covered. It's a beautiful smell if you don't know it. Just don't get it on your hands because it burns after a while. And good thing about brake clean is you can't have enough of it. Buy it by the case, because you will go through it liberal amounts of it. And just let that kind of air dry. It'll evaporate pretty quickly. And pop it on there, set your set screw, and now we can put the caliper back on and make sure everything's hooked up right and bolt everything down. We're good to go. All right, with our new caliper, the only thing you need to worry about is lining up your set screw so that everything's copacetic on that. And you find your set screw and you hope that you've got it lined up right. And we almost do. There she goes. Tighten that down. I've got the caliper set pretty precariously, but it's pretty much not going anywhere. And once that's set, you're good to go for putting the caliper back on. And all that does is sandwich in. You want to make sure that the bottom rails are hooked in real good. Tap that bad boy home. And wait till your holes are lined up and we can put this thing back together. So lining up the caliper bolts was kind of a pain in the butt. But if you do the bottom one first, you just finagle with it, get you a good light, and it'll finally go in. It's just an odd angle and all. The only difference between this one is, and some other vehicles, and brake jobs are pretty much the same for the most part. There are some differences, and I think there's even differences on these models, but this bracket that holds the caliper on is usually held on by like some 18 or 19 bolts that hold it to the hub assembly and everything. And you have to take that off to get everything apart and all, because obviously it wouldn't, because a lot of times it goes over the rotor and you can't get them off without it. Plus you need to take it off and clean it with brake clean anyway. Pop your little caps back on to keep the dust out. You want to put some supplied grease in those slide pins, because those pins that we just put in, they're moving that caliper in and out, and obviously lubrication is key in life. And torque them down to spec and you're pretty much good to go. And that's the simple part. Let me show you the only difference with the driver's side is you've got this attachment to it. And again, this is your wear indicator. It's a really flimsy line, but these clips are easy. You just push them in, pop it out, pop it on, and you're good. So there's nothing really much to it. And the thing with brake jobs is it's not that hard. I mean, you don't even need that many basic tools. A lot of people can do it probably with what they've got in their garage. But you know, you go to a brake shop or you know, a dealership or anything like that, and you know, they're gonna charge you $700, $800, $900, whatever. And it's robbery, man. Like, you can do this in and of an hour, and after you've done a few of them, it gets even quicker. Now, new cars like this, I've never worked on this car before, so there's always little surprises. You know, it's kind of odd taking things out with 7mm dowel pin, you know, hex head, because normally it's just bolts. It's going to be like a 13 or a 15 or something like that, and all that. And you know, the first time you might be surprised if you can't get the rotor off, because it should just fall off. But if it's been sitting for a while and it hadn't been run and it's just let rust accumulate and everything, it's going to be bonded. And I've had to bang on those things. This one came off pretty easy. I had to hit it like 2 or 3 times. But a lot of times, if they've been sitting for a while, they're going to be a chore to get off, but you can't hurt it, especially if you're switching the rotor out, because it's now scrap metal. So there's that. Yeah, so brake job 101. Pretty much all there is to it. Bolt the wheel back on, torque the lug nuts, and you're good to go. And you know, you're talking $100 in parts a lot of times for these little cars. So you know, you take an hour or 2 of your time and spend $100, and you just save $700. I mean, think about that. There's so much in this world you can do if you just take the time to learn how to do it. Quit paying people to do this crap, you know. Now, you know, maybe a head gasket isn't in your future, or you don't want to tear out, tear a crankshaft out of the bottom of a motor or something like that. I get that. That's fine. But don't be paying people to do thermostats and crap like that. It's just, it's robbery. It's absolute robbery. And the frustration that it gives you, it's character building when you work on these things. And it takes you 10 minutes to feed that bottom dowel pin in, and you're cussing. That's character building. And that's what we need. Giddy up.